All right, welcome to the show, Bonnie Badenoch.
I'm very happy to be here, Jayson. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so grateful you're here. I was telling you before we hit record that I found out about you with the Sounds True webcast you did on the myth of self-regulation, and I immediately perked up when I saw that title, and I was like, I've got to watch this. And it was really beautiful, and I learned a ton, and it was very helpful. So I want to get into a little bit of that today.
Wonderful. Well, it's certainly something that's very close to my heart. So,
Yeah. Well, Bonnie, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in the world.
well, I am a marriage and family therapist, and I'm in Vancouver, Washington, which is 20 minutes from Portland, Oregon, so up in the Pacific Northwest. And these days, we have a nonprofit organization called Nurturing the Heart with the Brain in Mind, which kind of honors both this felt sense of how important relationship is, but also understanding the neuroscience of relationship can really help stabilize us in the world, no matter what we're doing. It doesn't have to be a therapist to find a lot of benefit by understanding something about how we work, and so much is being discovered about that. So with that place, I mean, we used to do a lot of therapy. We're doing less of that now. I'm in my mid 70s, and I'm moving more toward teaching, writing, doing consulting, mentoring, and especially running long-term groups. We do a year-long immersion program in interpersonal neurobiology, where people from all around the world are coming for 3 days, 4 times a year, and really deepening into this work. So I love it when I get the opportunity to be with people over time, because it takes a while to marinate, I
Yeah.
think, in all of this.
Yeah, that's right.
Get it in an embodied sort of way.
Yeah, cool. Wow. It sounds like you're up to some amazing stuff. We'll talk a little bit about if people want to find out more about that at the end. And I'm curious how you got into this. How did you become a marriage and family therapist? What drew you to working with people?
Well, it's really been quite a lovely story, because up until my mid 40s, I was in the academic world. I was teaching, and I
Huh.
was noticing as I was teaching a number of things, but one class I taught was called How to Survive in College. And I was noticing I was enjoying my one-on-one time with my students more than the actual teaching. So that was a clue. And
Uh-huh.
about that time, I also got into my first really solid therapy. I come from a very abusive, frightening background, and had tried to get help and never found anything that really worked very well. And then I landed in the lap of a wonderful therapist who actually understood what had happened and was able to support me in a really safe way to move through this. So about midway through that therapy process of 6 years, I decided I wanted to leave the academic world and become a marriage and family therapist doing long-term work with trauma survivors, because my life was changing.
Wow.
And so immediately upon exiting graduate school, as a marriage and family therapist, a friend and I started a nonprofit organization that was in Irvine, California, and we had that organization for 17 years until I moved up here, and then I started another one up here.
Okay,
So my
cool.
heart really with helping others have a better quality of life when there had been a lot of trauma. Then I
Yep.
met in 2003. I met Dan Siegel by going to a conference, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up when he started talking about the brain, because I began to understand that this was the scientific platform on which our work was resting and how important it was.
Mm.
And I got to be with him for 5 years in a study group, back when Dan was able to do a little bit more of the close personal work, because his work hadn't expanded so much, and really count that as a transformative experience in my life,
Mm.
having those 5 years in that
Wow.
small group.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, okay, so obviously you've done a lot of healing and you've been witness to a lot of healing.
Yes.
It's so cool. I love it, right? This human journey and how we can really sit in with people through their intimate moments. It's really powerful.
It is
I'm
powerful.
guessing you've seen quite the arc of all the trauma work that's been developed over the last 30 or so years. What stands out to you about all of that work?
Well, what stands out to me probably the most is two things. One is the neuroscience piece, obviously, really has captured me, because again, working with deep trauma can be pretty destabilizing for the therapist as well. And what I saw with the interns that we had at our place in California, that as the neuroscience came in, it stabilized. It was like they
Mm.
understood or like their left hemisphere could really understand what was happening in the room in moments of high intensity. They could understand what was happening better in themselves and be able to hold not only get support then for themselves as well as support their clients more and their anxiety settled. Because I don't know about you, but I remember being an intern and thinking, can I even do this?
Oh, yeah.
Anxiety at that time. And
Yeah.
this seemed to really allay a lot of that anxiety, which really was a deeply beautiful kind of thing for me to see happen. So I think that that's one piece that I would say, is really very foundational for in this work. The other piece is that we're finally deeply understanding how much the body itself holds the trauma. And so all of the developments around sensory motor, around somatic experiencing, Hakomi, the many other embodied practices have really led us to a way of working at that level, because we hold trauma in our muscles, we hold it in our autonomic nervous system, we hold it in what we know now as our belly brain, as well as the heart brain, that we have 3 brains and that they're all very involved in that. So that's really become a core piece of the work for me, is finding ways to embody the experience, the therapy experience. And for me, that is through sand tray. We do sand tray work here, and we do a lot of art, and we also do other kinds of embodied awareness, really journeying and following the thread of the body into the traumatic memories and being able to be present that way to them in a deeper way. So those two things, neuroscience and the body, have really stood out to me as being the most transformative pieces. Not that there is a lot of value in other things like EMDR and all those kinds of things, but those two are kind of primary in my view.
Yeah, great. Now we're sitting in this conversation in the context of long-term partnership, and obviously trauma comes up. You marry someone, everything is roses, and wow, we fall in love, and then the years go on, and we start to get triggered in a way that brings back our earliest childhood traumas. And it starts to activate us in really strong ways, and people start to behave in ways that are, a little like their parents, or a little aggressive, or they just completely collapse. So I want to start to talk about this stuff about the brain and the body in the context of an intimate partnership. And why I loved reaching out to you was this whole concept of self-regulation versus co-regulation. Will you talk about maybe the myth of self-regulation, and then why co-regulation, why we need to talk about this if we're in a marriage, say, for example?
Yeah, especially in a marriage where the opportunity for co-regulation with our partners is alive, every day. Not that it may be not that it may be happening, but the possibility is there because we have this intimate partnership, whereas a lot of people in this world don't have that. And so the opportunities for co-regulation are just much less because we're not with somebody so much of the time.
Right.
However, as you're saying, when we marry, we tend to, and this is not a manipulative thing at all, these wonderful sides of ourselves meet and join. And then as we become more intimate, it's a natural thing to begin to sink down into the deeper layers of ourselves. And then when we encounter old experiences of whatever kind, traumatic experiences, whether it's of neglect or there's been abuse or there's just been, say, chaos in a family that we came from, as we sink down into those layers, they begin to then come up into the relationship. And at that point, we can have co-disregulation. So say the one partner begins to touch a lot of anxiety as they begin to move down through these layers and remember, and the body begins to remember the experience that intimacy in the family of origin meant anxiety was going to be really present because that's how the family was living.
Yeah.
So this person starts to become anxious. The person over here gets scared now because this person isn't able to connect anymore. Once we're in anxiety, our ability to connect goes offline. So now the other partner's over here trying to find this person, and they can't find them anymore. They can't feel that warm sense of joining. So then this person goes into whatever activation that reminds them of. Maybe they feel abandoned, and maybe that makes them angry, or they feel abandoned, and so they withdraw. I mean, it could be whatever pathways we have learned and are kind of ingrained in our brains get activated that way. So now we have two people who no longer have the capacity to find each other. Mm-hmm. So now we have co-dysregulation going both ways.
Yep.
So anxiety is going up and fear is going up over here. And so now we have two people who come into our office who are like, we really loved each other and now we're just miserable.
Yeah, we're just stressed out and dysregulated.
That's right. We're stressed out, dysregulated, and lonely because
Uh-huh.
we won't feel connected anymore. So I
Yeah.
feel lonely with my partner, and that's a really, really awful kind of feeling.
Yeah.
So when we can begin to talk about this idea of whether the people feel safe together or not, we're at the threshold of beginning to explore the possibility of creating co-regulation.
Okay, and let's pause there. Now, in this moment when the couple comes in, they're dysregulated, they're stressed out. This is where I historically, in some, I'm guessing, therapeutic approaches, have said, "Hey, guys, you need to be able to be with your experience." Right? Even the spiritual traditions of meditation of like, "Hey, you got to be able to sit with the stress and tolerate the discomfort of your experience," and I think that's really valuable, and to a point. Right. And so I want to, before we move into this possibility of co-regulation, will you talk about why some people go into self-regulation and because in their mind they're thinking, well, if that my partner's not here for me, that's my only choice is to try to self-regulate and just be with myself.
Well, right, and I think you just said it. I mean, that's what I would say is if we don't have the option of co-regulating, then we tend to go back and try to rely on things that we probably had to rely on as children in our family, which is I have to somehow get a hold of this myself. I have to do it myself. For our brains, that is a very energy and attention consuming thing. It's much harder to self-regulate. Co-regulation is natural. It's how we're built. Self-regulation is not natural, and it takes a lot more effort. And it causes the person to move into greater isolation, which then exacerbates the whole cycle of
Yeah.
feeling lost from each other. So the person tries to get a hold of themselves. They're lonely. They need somebody else to help them with this. They can't find it. Somehow they manage to get a hold of old habits or something of being more human in the relationship or whatever. But the connection won't return because they're not feeling safe.
Yeah.
Self-regulating, we have abandoned the possibility of coming together in a way that we can co-regulate. So it's a very difficult place. And what I see happen with couples is they pull farther and farther apart as they move into self-regulation. They have less and less belief
Yeah.
or sense that they can actually come together.
Right. And if they grew up in a family, like if they grew up as children and their parents said, go to your room, and they went to their room and all they had was maybe their phone or their teddy bear or whatever, like they kind of figured it out. Right. And they did somehow learn to figure it out on their own because the big people weren't there for them. And then they now start playing that out in their adult relationship. Is that right?
Yes. And yet the anxiety is still playing out underneath in the background. It doesn't mean it completely goes away because it
Right.
hasn't healed. So now you have somebody who's spending a lot of time keeping this anxiety back, and there's no real healing happening.
Yeah. And I might go take some medication or something to try to deal with the anxiety.
They might take medication. They might just separate more so that they're not seeing this person over here who's scared so much. They're not looking at their partner's face and picking
Oh
up on
man.
the fear anymore. So they go
Yeah.
back into their phone, their tablet, their
Yeah.
work. I know that from my own experience because workaholism was modeled in my family by my dad.
Uh-huh.
And so I learned that if things aren't going well and they feel bad enough, I can self-regulate through work.
Yeah. Totally.
So I know how to do that,
Yep.
and if that's my only option, it's a good option because it helps and I get stuff done, and
Yeah.
all that kind of thing. But it
Right.
doesn't do anything to draw closer into relationship at
Yeah.
all.
So, okay. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't. I mean, I can stay in a workaholic habit for years, right? And live with my partner, and then we become roommates, and we're co-parenting the kids, maybe, but we've really lost that sense of safety, and now we've become tolerant and used to it, and now it's our new normal.
Right. And and we're deeply unhappy in some way, even if we don't always recognize it.
Yeah. Yep.
This
Okay.
is
So,
what I'm going for. Yeah.
yeah, man, this is the deal, right? And this happens to so many couples. I'm sure you, the listener, can relate. At least one or more. Now, just help us bridge the gap then. So we start to identify, okay, I have this habit of going to work when I feel stress or anxiety because when I'm not getting my needs met and we're dysregulated as a couple, I just do what's comfortable or what's kind of normal. But how do I bridge that gap? How do I start, introduce us to the concept of co-regulation and then maybe some tips on how do we get there?
Right. Well, often I think when a couple has reached that level, they're going to need somebody to intervene. It doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist, but they need a third person who can begin to sit with them, which can be a friend or whoever it is, and help them feel, again, safe enough by having that third person come in, because they no longer feel safe with each other. They can't really face each other and come together anymore. Most often somebody else needs to come in, and they can begin to talk with that they feel safe with, so that instead of looking at each other or looking away, they begin to look at this third person.
Uh-huh.
That becomes the person who can begin to activate the co-regulation by beginning to listen to this person. So maybe I come in and I say, I'm really aware that I'm working like crazy and that I'm really actually scared inside and all of this kind of stuff. And at that point, for me, because I do deep long-term trauma work, what I would want to do if I were the third person there would be to help this one who's turned to work to ask, what would happen if you stopped doing that hard work? What would you have to feel? And begin to go back to that anxious child who had to go to his room, like you were saying, and figure out how to do it on his own. And then that person would be helping this person heal from that pain by going and being with that child in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And helping that child, and helping the neural nets literally change that hold that child's experience. And it takes time to do this. So as we go to this child in the room and that child feels calmer, he begins to move out of that room and come more into the present, and then there is less anxiety there, so there's a greater sense. So this person, this third person, is helping to co-regulate with the one who's anxious, and then turning to the other partner who feels abandoned, again going to the abandoned child and that person.
Yeah.
As the systems of both people calm down, then they can begin to, first of all, have empathy for what each one has been suffering with all this time.
So it's
comes into the room.
Yeah, so it's like one of the first steps I'm hearing you say is to feel safe enough to start to go vulnerable, right? Get out of my defensive posture, admit and acknowledge what's actually going on inside, which is I feel terribly alone, scared, anxious. And if I can say that to a third party, then I might be able to turn toward my partner, right? And they can have some empathy for me.
Right, because that's right. Because especially with the intervention of another person, but also with the vulnerability on one side, that tends to draw up in the partner also a sense of warmth and empathy in their own vulnerability, in the form of being willing to extend themselves back to this person, even though they felt safe before. And when both people are doing that in this kind of triangle context, what happens is this kind of rich, compassionate co-regulation begins to fill the room. As I maybe reach out to, if I'm the one who's felt abandoned, I reach out and I say, I'm so sorry for that child who's sitting alone in his room trying to take care of things himself, and the other person says, I never meant to abandon you. I was just frightened,
Right.
Things begin to shift for people in a way that they're seeing deeper below the surface behaviors, which are co-disregulating. They begin to see to the place where the mutual pain is, where the co-regulation can happen.
Got it.
But it often at the beginning stages requires a third person to come in and hold that.
Yeah. And so I'm just thinking about the listener here. They might be thinking, well, how long do we have to have a third person there before we can do this ourselves?
As long as it takes, which
could be months or years or weeks.
It could be twice. It could be, months or years, or, it just depends on the magnitude of the pain.
Yeah.
And how quickly that kind of mutual vulnerability and caring is able to establish. But what tends to happen is that there's layers of these painful kinds of things. So you get to one where it gets kind of resolved and you're together, and then something else happens in the world or between the two people or with the kids, and maybe another layer comes up. So yeah. I think it's really lovely. I mean, in my practice, it's always been people come until they feel kind of settled, and then they go off, and then when something comes up again, they can come back. And I think that that's wonderful. And if we have friends like that too, that are reliable people to go back to, it's maybe more of an in and out thing where you come in and work with something for a little while, and then when the next thing comes up, you come back. And I wish the world were organized that way.
Yeah, totally.
That way, the shaman was there. Things got bad, you went to the shaman. They got bad again, you went back. And
well, it's like a good family, right? The kid gets hurt at school, and guess the safest place he feels ideally is home, and so you come home and repair and feel safe again. Then you go out into the world again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that model for drawing in whoever we need to co-regulate until we can do it with the people closest to us.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit what is co-regulation? What's happening in the brain, and why, this seems to be a pretty new conversation in the therapeutic world, in terms of co-regulation. What is it, and why is this so vital?
Well, it's amazing how connected we actually are to one another at so many levels inside of us. We have mirror neurons that are connected to resonance circuitry. That means that at all times we're sensing the world of those around us, and those closest to us, of course, we're sensing the most. And so we have, if you and I came together and say one of us was really off this morning for some reason, for whatever reason, we would feel that in each other, even if it doesn't rise to the level of conscious awareness.
Yeah,
So much goes on below the level of conscious awareness.
totally.
But if you were feeling really anxious, or I was, there would be effects on our face, in the quality of our voice. And this is the work of Stephen Porges that I'm going to talk about the autonomic nervous system,
Okay.
where we're constantly signaling to one another whether there's safety or not. And if things feel safe, if we have what's called a neuroception of safety, which means below the level of conscious awareness, we, at an organic level, feel safe with the person, then we open into relationship.
Hmm.
And that's co-regulation happens, is when
Yeah.
both are in that state.
Yeah.
So if I am telegraphing to you by the mobility of my face, by the quality of my voice, by the look in my eye, by your sense that I'm really listening to you, because all of those things come on when we have a neuroception of safety, then it's like offering you an invitation to come and be here with me. And our
Yeah.
system wants to do that. We have a preference for that. So it's called the social engagement state. We have a preference for that. So when my clients come in, even if they're quite anxious, if I'm able to offer them this open, receptive, non-judgmental, welcoming state, there's some probability that they'll be able to settle into that with me, because
Got
their
it.
system wants to come toward that. So you think about that with a couple. If one person is in that state, they almost literally have their emotional arms open to the person with an invitation to come and be vulnerable, and let's really talk about what's happening.
Yeah, and through my openness and my availability, I can help you calm.
Right,
Right
because
on
we
this.
have this tremendous resonance, as well as reading these facial and bodily signals in each other all the time. Our system is literally asking at every moment with every person, are you with me? Meaning, will you receive me without judgment, without agenda, and just be present with me?
Yeah,
That's safety.
totally.
That's safety.
And
And
so
when
hard to do if you have layers and years of stuff in the way, right? Of hurt and resentment. But that's the
right,
work, right? Is we a couple has to get to that level, base level of safety, to be able to really reap the benefits of co-regulation in a way that you're talking about it.
exactly. So after we've worked with a couple for a while, maybe let's say the one partner knows that their partner comes home from work stressed pretty much every day. And prior to that, this person was feeling abandoned because this person wasn't available. Now, understanding this and working with this, instead, this partner is able to offer that wide open receptive space, maybe a cup of tea or whatever the person likes,
Yep.
and welcome them home and listen for a while. And suddenly they are able to stay together.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I need, maybe the one partner comes home and wants space.
Right.
And so it's like, cool, I'm going to open my arms to that and like, let you
Absolutely.
have space. Cause I'm over here. I might be activated by that, but I've got to work with myself in such a way that like allows you to take your space, if that's going to help you come back to us, right? Come back to
Right.
me.
Right. And sometimes people just do need quiet. And so maybe you actually create a quiet place in the home where this person can go and be still and read, meditate, breathe, whatever it is that they want to do in order to allow their system to settle. And you do that as a gift to your partner.
Yeah. Okay. Let me challenge this a little bit. So
Yeah.
I can hear the listener going, yeah, but that doesn't happen in my house.
Probably not yet, but it might.
Not yet. Yeah, exactly. So they come home, partner comes home from work or whatever, and there's collective stress in the system. But one person's like really trying to be ready for the partner to come home, knowing that they're stressed out because they have financial stress going on. He or she walks in the door and is like, I need space. That's all I need. And then I'll be available in, half hour or whatever. But let's say I'm the receiver. I take that personally. And
Right.
now I'm triggered, right? And I'm pissed, I'm hurt, and I'm like, no, we need to talk, and we need to talk about our money. And I just push. Someone in that system has to take responsibility here for calming down, right? And this is where I want to talk about, is self-regulation then an asset, a potential asset here for one party to be able to like somehow get calm enough to be available for the other person? Is that what you recommend, or what happens here?
Well, again, I don't think it's just self-regulation. If this person, if the partner who's feeling hurt in that moment and realizes that something's been awakened in them, touched and awakened in their system, and if that person has internalized others, because when with this resonance circuitry, we're also taking in the people who we felt calm with.
In our
So maybe
life.
I had, and throughout our life.
Good, got it.
So maybe I had this auntie, maybe my household wasn't so great, but I had this auntie that I could rely on. And to calm me down, she'd take me in her arms. She'd listen to me when I was 6 to 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I have her as part of my inner being. So the one of the most effective ways to so-called self-regulate is to co-regulate with our inner people.
Right. Internal co-regulation.
Internal co-regulation.
Got it.
And so I have several people in my life that are completely reliable for me. So if I start to get upset, I just almost automatically go to one of these people inside and we hold it together. And then often I can deepen into what's being touched in me and all of that kind of thing.
Got it. Okay. So this is important because this is kind of like inner child work on yourself. It's almost like being a parent or that loving figure. Can it be an imaginary figure? Or does it have to be an actual experience of someone in my life that was caring toward me? I can internalize that, and that can help me soothe and calm.
It could probably be that. It could probably be an imaginary person, but I think, and I've seen that, but I think the most effective thing is when we've had actual experiences of our whole being, especially our autonomic nervous system, settling into safety in the presence of another who we've then taken in. Then when we go back to that, we are literally, you talk about being triggered. I use the words touched and awakened instead of triggered because I don't like the violence.
Okay.
But when
touched and awakened.
That doesn't mean you have to do it, but that's just my
I like it though. I like it.
Yeah, when we've been touched and awakened in a painful kind of way, we can equally be touched and awakened by the memory of somebody who has been calming and sweet for us.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is side by side with this abandoned, say, awakening that's happened, is bring in the awakening of somebody who would help us when we felt abandoned.
Okay.
So that's what's most alive in our system. If it's an imaginary person, it's just not as powerful because we don't have this kind of long-term patterning and internalization that we have with people. But I did have a person who internalized Donna Reed as the model for being a mother, and she was such a much better mother than her mother had been to her. And then she got even better after therapy, but she was able to be there for her kids just by internalizing this, imaginary, you're probably too young to know the Donna Reed show, but she was kind of like the archetypal 50s mom or something.
Okay.
And it was better. It was better than if she had not had that, but not as good as actually having somebody mother her.
Yeah, that's right. Because we all need that. So, okay. So listener, I'm just a quick side note here for the listener that, you want to look around in your own life at someone who has really been there for you and held you through an upsetting time. And that can be your internal regulatory system, so that you rely on that in a moment of upset so that you can be there for your partner. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah.
Right.
I really,
and even that's not always available. And then you turn to a friend, if I get a certain level of upset, I have 2 or 3 friends I know I can call, and I know they absolutely will not try to fix it.
Yeah.
They will actually just listen to me and receive me and hold me as I work through with their support what's going on for me.
Yeah. Great.
If somebody comes in and tries to fix it, it immediately takes safety away.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And that's a habit for some people in our culture, is to fix it because we're anxious about you being upset, right? I want to calm my own anxiety down by making your upset go away.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let's talk about the brain for a minute in terms of this internal co-regulation. Is it the same as, I know you talk about the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain. Is it, in a way, one hemisphere is regulating another hemisphere? Is that what's going on? Or is it not really like that?
Not so much, but though we hold the emotional quality of these relationships in the right hemisphere. It's mainly which is connected more to the body kind of feeling. Because if you think about it, the way we know we're calming down isn't a thought. We know it because we feel it in our bodies.
Uh-huh.
So what we want to wake up are these embodied experiences that we've had with somebody who was sweetly calming for us. And so when we do that, we're actually finding that circuitry is rooted, even though it's, throughout the sensory system and all that, but it's rooted in the right hemisphere experience, embodied experience. And so as we direct our mind toward that, we're going in a more right-centric kind of mode, as opposed to the left-centric mode, which is much more disconnected and not relational, but having to do with problem solving and tasks and behaviors, which is important, but it isn't relational. So when you see people who are mainly shifted into the left hemisphere world of tasks and all of that kind of thing, which is what a workaholic does, they are automatically relationally disconnected because that circuitry isn't there.
How do you recommending accessing someone who is more left-brained, independent, kind of self-reliant, and they're harder to reach maybe in the relationship?
Well, they are, because they're usually, most of us hang out in the left hemisphere alone the left and the right need to work together. That's the ideal, is having a right hemisphere relational focus, but having the left providing support. So it isn't like we want to get rid of the left hemisphere at all. But when we isolate into the left, most of the time it's because our world is so painful that we can't stand to feel it. So the last thing we want to do with a person like that is to try to get them to feel their pain, because it's already overwhelming, which is why they're over here.
Okay.
So in the therapeutic sense, what I want to help people do is get in touch with positive feelings that they've had in their lives, so that they can begin to reconnect the two hemispheres and can begin to listen to the side that is carrying the pain, but also is carrying all the good memories. So it's like having to build a bridge between the two hemispheres.
So they're not so threatened by it that they shut down.
Exactly. And so we have to get to something positive first. So we'll talk about, thinking about a time when you felt joy or that kind of thing, and a time where you felt cared about. And if the person can find that, then we can kind of begin to pursue little threads in the body of how that felt, and it begins to make it a little safer to begin to venture over there. It's longer term work.
Yeah, that sounds like a great therapeutic intervention. What can a couple do when one partner, because that relationship where one partner is more right-centered, connective, leading the relationship, hey, let's connect, I want to, where are you? I want to feel you. And the other person's, that's threatening for whatever reason. And then if I keep coming at you, it's more threatening. So how does a partner in that couple dyad, what would be a tip that you could give that person to reach the independent person?
Well, if you know that what the independent person actually enjoys, join them there.
Yeah.
Maybe reading the New York Times together or whatever. Maybe it's sitting in on a particular video game that this person is really engaged in. Maybe it's having a discussion about a movie.
Yeah, an intellectual conversation that's stimulating.
Joining the person there with your heart, without doing it. See, this is the tricky part. Without doing it as a technique, because if you do it as a technique, then as an honest wish to join, the other person knows that.
Right, they feel the agenda.
They feel the agenda. And the minute the agenda there, safety is gone. So it isn't like I'll get them by going over to their left hemisphere. It's about like, I wonder what I might enjoy talking with this person about so that I could be in their world. Because basically, if we're asking the person to come over here and talk emotionally, what we're saying is leave your world and come and be in mine. I don't care anything about your world.
Right.
So instead, but what if I came over and joined you? And if that person, remember, the person basically does want connection, that the system is geared to want connection. And if coming over there creates more safety by coming into this world together, then that person may be able to follow the other person over here.
Right, because the independent person, deep down inside, if there's some existential angst about how lonely they feel and isolated, right? It's not like they're that happy over there.
Right, and but the deal is a lot of that information's in the right hemisphere, so often the person in the left doesn't even know how much they're suffering. Right. But it shows up on a brain scan. When you scan somebody who's pretty left-centric and show them pictures faster than they can record, see what the picture is, of scenes of attachment, their brain goes into a lot of painful activation, a lot of amygdala activation, which indicates fear and pain. And when you pull them out of the scanner and ask them about it, they didn't experience anything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild, right?
Yeah, but it's underlying there, So we know there's this wish, even then, below the level of conscious awareness, to be joined. So how good would it feel to have somebody come into your world and join you?
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Great. So we're using techniques in a way that try to get at the unconscious, right, level of helping the person feel safe.
Doing it not as technique, but
Yep.
is on an offer of connection.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
The
And
minute manipulation is involved, safety's off the table.
right. Yeah, because now I'm trying to get something and they feel that. And again, on that same neuroceptual, what did you call that?
Neuroception. Yeah,
Neuroception level, below conscious awareness, they're feeling it, right?
yeah.
Now, is this the same as, can you talk about the social engagement system? I think that Porges talks about in terms of the dorsal, ventral,
Yeah, I can talk.
just
Yeah,
because I personally like to geek out on that. I know some of my listeners are like, dude, stop with the brain stuff, but I really like that. And I think it's valuable for some of us to just get a little tip on what's actually happening there internally.
right. And again, I've shared this with a lot of couples because they don't, if I have a couple that's had real struggles with each other, like when they come together in the evening, let's say things go wrong almost before the person who's coming home is in the door or before
Right.
they both in the door, then the question I'll ask is, when do you stop feeling safe on your way home? And the couple might say, as soon as I think about coming home, I start, because I know something bad is going to happen, you know? So when we begin to talk about just what you're asking is, how does our nervous system know about safety? And again, this is Steve Porges' beautiful work that is just so powerful. So we have three branches, not two, of the autonomic nervous system. We used to think there was just a sympathetic and parasympathetic. It turns out now there's one sympathetic and two parasympathetics that are completely independent of each other. So when we have a neuroception of safety, that branch of a branch of the nervous system, the ventral vagal parasympathetic for the geeks among us, or ventral for short, comes online and does wonderful things because it softens our voice. It tightens our ears in a way that we're able to focus in on the human voice rather than having to scan the whole surround for sounds of danger, so I can really listen to you and hear the meaning of your words. It softens our eyes as we're taking people in non-judgmentally and just being receptive to them. It makes our whole face mobile. There are so many cues in just what happens to our system when this ventral branch is on. And it is, again, asking, it's inviting others to come sit. It's safe here now. This is a safe place to be. We're like a landing strip of safety.
And you're calling this the new sort of secondary subterranean version of the parasympathetic?
Well, this is the newest branch of the parasympathetic, and it is myelinated, which means the signals, that's the sheath wrapped around the axons, around the connections, which means that the signals move more rapidly and all of that. So it's a rapid firing system. It's mainly, it comes from up in here in the brainstem and innervates mainly the heart. Some of them the belly, but mainly the heart. And then it's also connected with the striated muscles of the face, which makes our face mobile. When our whole face is moving, we're saying to everybody, it's safe here. Come join me.
And I feel that on a neuroceptual level, right?
Yes, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Our system is on looking for the signals of safety and danger.
And this is different. This part of the parasympathetic is different than the part of the parasympathetic where I shut down.
Right. And we'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. Right. And it's literally different. I mean, the other one goes way, way down in the sacrum and everything. This is all up in here.
Right.
So, and the heart brain itself is also about connection. So it makes sense that this would innervate the heart. So this is the connective system. So once we lose that neuroception of safety, something happens, and it could be a loud sound outside, it could be something arising within us, it could be a tough day, and now we're having a neuroception of danger, which touches the sympathetic nervous system. It comes online adaptively when we feel endangered. We need it. If we didn't, we couldn't take care of ourselves. So this is all adaptive stuff. So fight, flight, and now we also know a brief freeze response comes about with this activation. All of our metabolics go up. Social engagement goes offline because I can't be here quietly talking with you and enjoying you and still attending to danger. Yeah. So adaptively, social engagement goes off, which means co-regulation is now gone because you can't do that from that state.
Yep.
Voice will have a different quality. My ears open so I can hear the whole surround, which means I can't listen to you anymore. My eyes focus, looking very tight, scanning for danger.
Yep.
And you can feel that any of us who can remember being cut off on the freeway or having a sudden jolt of some sort can just feel how the whole system shifts, the neurochemical shift, everything shifts. But mostly we get pulled out of connection adaptively, and we also stop learning any kind of new information. We can't take in new information because we're completely occupied in survival.
Yeah.
We may have a moment of freeze, and then while our system decides whether to fight or flee, and then we do that, we fight or flee. And maybe we only do it internally. Maybe we never move a muscle, but it will activate that, that response.
So it's in a way, like the this part of the parasympathetic goes offline, that freezes so that I can attend to danger.
Right. It just simply withdraws. I wouldn't say it freezes. There's something called the vagal brake when we're in ventral. It keeps our heart rate at a moderate rate, which tells us we're safe. So it takes off the vagal brake.
Okay.
So that system recedes. And the sympathetic, now the heart beats faster, pumps the blood, we can, take care of ourselves. But there's a third branch too, which is the dorsal vagal parasympathetic, which is what you're talking about, which is the collapsed state.
Yeah.
We reach a level where we feel helpless, because in fight flight, we still believe we can do something. When we get to the point where we feel helpless, our system believes it will die, and our system begins to go toward feigning death, which means our heart rate goes down, our everything drops. Our face will get more pale. The blood isn't pumping as much. The face loses all of its mobility, and we go kind of blank.
Yeah.
And you can watch people do this. The light begins to go out of the eyes, and the person may still be talking and carrying on a conversation, but you can feel that internally they've left.
Yeah, and this happens in a partnership all the time, right? When one partner shuts down.
Yes, and again, helplessness is the foundation for that perception that neuroception that I cannot do anything to make this different or better.
Yeah, and they can almost literally not think, right? It's like some part of them is just like, it's hard for them to talk, and then the other partner might be like, "Hey, come on, what's going on? Why don't you tell me what's happening?" And they're just like,
it's even more frightening, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that helplessness, and it especially happens for people who had in order to maintain survival, had to dissociate as kids.
Yeah.
So when we've really developed a strong dorsal experience, then it's much easier to access that when we are, when we're adults, because it's a well-worn pathway. We know how to do that when we feel helpless. And so we'll continue to do it as adults. And the other person might go like, well, why do you feel helpless? All you have to do is speak up,
Right.
But this person is having a neuroception that they aren't, probably based on childhood.
Yeah.
And so for them, it's an adaptive response to feeling like there's no answer here.
Yeah. So again, we can be, if we're a partner to that person who's shutting down, we can be safe and welcoming and warm, right? And let them.
Everybody have to say, you must be feeling really scared to go so far away or something,
Uh-huh.
And again, have that empathic response when it no longer feels like an attack on us. And that's why I think explaining this, at least for me, explaining this to my couples as they would come to me, could change almost overnight how they were relating to one another, because they would sense a shift, like we're talking, and then all of a sudden you could feel that this person had gone away over here somehow, like they weren't really listening anymore. We all feel that. And instead of going like, what a jerk, the person might be able to go, I wonder why you had to go away from me. I wonder what's happening for you. You mustn't be feeling safe.
Yeah.
Just by understanding this information. And of course, that will almost inevitably bring the person back then to have the conversation, because this person stayed safe for them.
Yeah, totally.
It's called regulation at its best.
Great. Yeah. So to bring it full circle, with these amazingly powerful and immediate responses in the body, right? And then how the brain and the body work, we can use that same neuroception, you're calling it, to help our partner and help each other co-regulate in a safe way. And again, with safety being the real primary here.
Safety being the real primary here. And again, that's why when people get to a certain point where non-safety has been established for so long, which can happen gradually with couples, over time. There's
totally.
Not safe. And those are the couples, hopefully, who come to us. And then we become the cornerstone of the safety for that period of time while we're helping them build that capacity for safety with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Wow. That's a lot, Bonnie. It's amazing, huh?
It's amazing. And we are so unbelievably beautifully made for relationship.
I so agree. I'm so with you.
And we also have everything within us for it to be the most miserable experience because it's so important to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope we can all feel good about getting the support of friends, pastors, therapists, or whatever when things go really haywire, just long enough to be able to again settle into that sense of connection, and then we can take it from there. But to not feel like somehow we have to figure this stuff out on our own, because we aren't very good at that, honestly, because we're built to be with others. Can I share just one other quick thing?
Please.
Something called social baseline theory by a man named Lane Becks and James Cohen. And what this talks about is that we have evolved to expect to be held in a nest of warm relationships. And when we aren't, it's an actual violation of our core neurobiology. So what they talk about is, in their research, if we're standing before a very difficult task, climbing a mountain or whatever it is, if we're on our own, that task may look impossible. If somebody comes next to us, somebody we don't even know, but they feel okay to us, that task looks easier. If a trusted beloved comes next to us who we really feel safe with, the task looks like a piece of cake, and yet nothing has changed. And the same is true for the perception of pain. Is true for any kind of challenge that we have. When we're joined, even though the outer thing hasn't changed, everything about it changes. And the reason is, when someone we feel is trustworthy comes next to us, our amygdala calms down all on its own. It stops firing as much. So we aren't even having to use the regulatory circuitry of the prefrontal cortex to calm down. It simply happens because the other person comes there, because that's what our system has evolved to expect.
Isn't that incredible?
Isn't that incredible?
I mean, it makes sense. It's like that Harvard study that says that, the best lived life really is about the quality of your relationships and having people close that you feel safe with and connected to.
Right. So it's not so much our outer circumstances as it is who's with us, who's really with us in that non-judgmental, receptive, loving way. So
yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, I do too. I love social baseline theory. I think it's very
I mean, again, for the listener, I'm thinking, okay, we're all feeling pretty challenged right now in our lives, and what can make our lives seem and appear less challenging and have the courage to face it is relationships. Like if we surround ourselves with quality friends and lovers, then wow, I think those challenges the mountain's not going to be so steep, right?
Exactly. The mountain won't be nearly as steep, and we'll find ways through that we can't find otherwise. I was just talking to a friend the other day, and she mentioned she was struggling with something, and that she thought about it and couldn't figure out what it was about. And I listened to her for, I think we decided it was about maybe 8 or 9 minutes, and she had resolved the issue inside of herself. I don't think I said 3 words, but I was really there, and so she knew she was being heard, and it gave her the freedom, the surrounding, holding freedom to go deeper and find it and hold it and go, well, no wonder I have that experience, and then found her own solution in asking her partner to do something just a little bit differently, which he would do.
Yeah, I mean, all the more reason to learn how to be there for other people.
Yes.
It's also innate and intuitive in us, it seems like, but if what was modeled to us was a bunch of fixing and we're not okay with this emotion and all that stuff, then we sort of learn to be a little compromised there. But it seems innate in us to really just be able to listen and be present with someone.
It really is innate, but yes, you're right. We live in a society that's very left shifted, about 75% of us, according to the research, which means we are going for fixes, tasks, behaviors, those kinds of things, almost like automatically.
Yeah.
And so it takes an effort to get back to our innate neurobiological propensity to be present for one another.
Yeah.
But it's possible.
Wow, cool.
Always in there. I mean, the innate health is in there. No matter what's layered on top of it, what you're saying is true. It's in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's work to find it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Support one another to find it. So we aren't trying to find it by ourselves.
Right.
Because that's always the tendency, like, well, if it's in there, I'll dig around and I'll find it. It's like, no, the whole point is if somebody is with us, then it will emerge kind of on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Bonnie, this has been so enriching for me. I'm just grateful again. I can really feel just your aliveness too around the subject matter of relationship and connection. And, clearly this is one of your gifts in life to show people this and what's possible here.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to be with you, and your interest in all the work you're doing for couples, is wonderful.
Yeah, thanks. Where can people find out more about you and what you're up to in the world and your books and trainings?
Well, thank you. It's our organization is Nurturing the Heart with the Brain in Mind, and the website is nurturingtheheart.org. And our programs, our long-term immersion programs are on there. We are filling up for 2018 already. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you visit that site and see what we're up to. I'm doing consultation and things like that more. I have a couple of books, Being a Brainwise Therapist, and then the Brain Savvy Therapist Workbook. And just this week, my new book called The Heart of Trauma, Healing Our Embodied Brains in the Context of Relationship is going to copy editing. So it'll be out later this year, I'm happy to say.
Oh, cool. Great. Send me an email. I'd love to just promote that.
Thank you. Well, if you look on the website, you'll see other resources as well for various kinds of things. So you're just welcome to puddle around there. And I'll actually be working on the website in the next few days because it needs some updating. But anyway, feel free to contact us, and we'll just be very happy to respond to you.
Okay, cool. And you do some of those trainings are for therapists, right?
Well, they are, but we always have interested others, and we've had therapists bring their husbands. I've had a poet. I've had the guys that get the planes to come in, the flight guys.
Yeah.
I've had all different kinds of people come, and we always have 2 or 3 people that aren't therapists that come to those that just want to deepen into this capacity to be present and learn more about the brain. So we're really pretty open to everybody. One of my major interests in my aging years is helping people be a therapeutic presence in the world more than just in the counseling room. How do we walk around in this state, because it's so needed.
Oh, man.
And it's so good for us. I mean, it lengthens our life, and everybody benefits when we're able to get into these states more.
That's right. That's why I started the relationship school, so that we can eventually get this stuff to kids. And it's just part of our education is how to do connection.
Yes. Yeah, it's wonderful. And some schools are picking up on this more.
Yeah.
Where it's connection before curriculum. I mean, that's what we try to say about it. We need connection before we go to curriculum.
Oh, that's great.
And then kids learn better. I mean, there's a good educational reason for doing that, because if you're in that ventral state, you can learn. If you're sympathetically aroused, you cannot learn very well.
Yeah. Can I borrow that term? That is outstanding. Connection before curriculum.
Yes, you may absolutely have it.
Oh my gosh.
I'll also reference Kirk Olson's book called The Invisible Classroom, where he and I worked through that whole idea of how to convey that.
Oh, cool. Okay. I'm going to spread that one far and wide. Great.
Kirk Olson, Invisible Classroom, if you're a teacher. It's a wonderful, wonderful book that I ought to be side by side with him on. So, yes.
All right. Wonderful.
Thank you for having me. It's delightful to be here and to be with you. I feel like the connection's really wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm feeling that too. You're welcome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Bye.